Hello and welcome. Today I am joined by Dr. Jamie Kearns, who was the head of medical at Munster Rugby, where I think he's at currently, and he's also a sport and exercise medicine consultant. So Jamie, thank you for joining. How are you doing?
Good, Andy. Thanks very much for having me.
No problem, no problem. So yeah, where are you based at the moment? You gave me a very quick tour just a
Yeah,
minute
so
ago.
I'm just based in our high performance centre here in Limerick, and we're based at the University of Limerick, and we have our own high performance centre for Munster Rugby here. So I'm just in our medical office today on duty.
Right, and how's the day been so far?
Good, yeah. So Mondays are kind of return to train day after the weekend. We had a match on Saturday, so do our injury clinic first thing in the morning, do a little bit of follow up with some of the guys who are maybe returning to play, and then just catching up with some of the guys who are coming back, particularly from the World Cup at the minute. We've got a few guys filtering back in, so just kind of getting them back up to speed, dealing with any niggles and injuries that came out of the World Cup, and just getting guys back into our program really.
Very good. And how was it with the guys coming back in? Obviously, there'll be disappointment, I'm sure.
Yeah, well, we have a mix because obviously we have a couple of guys coming back who've got World Cup winner medals. So that's kind of it's an interesting dynamic to have a few guys in here who are very happy and then a couple of guys who are not as happy. So it's an interesting dynamic. Um, we've had an interesting day. We had Keith Earls in early actually today. So Keith's obviously finished up after the World Cup. So he was doing his kind of debrief with the squad or just saying his goodbyes and stuff. So it was kind of quite poignant. A super guy and a great player for Munster for a number of years, 13 years probably at this stage. So we did go through some exit medical stuff with him as well. So it was an interesting day, kind of a little bit different than usual. So, but no, it's good vibe. Guys are kind of happy to be back in the environment. It's kind of like being back at school in some ways. So for them, so it's good. No, it's a good way to get them. You can't really be moping around for too long because everyone's going to just pick you back up again or kick you back down depending on their approach, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, it's good. It's good. It's good.
And what's the dynamic like there whilst everyone Rugby World Cup's going on? Because it's a bit different in terms of like you're still moving along and doing things as opposed to football that stops. So what's the dynamic like in terms of that? Because throughout the year, like the international scene again is slightly different in rugby, isn't it, to football?
Yeah, so so what happens, like we've had a nearly 13, 14 week preseason without probably 8 or 9 guys who, well, probably nearly 10 actually, who were away with various teams at the World Cup. So the guys will come up maybe from the academy to fill those spaces, or some guys will be invited in. So it's quite a young group around the place. And then once those guys have finished their World Cup or international involvement, they'll have a couple of weeks kind of their own time and break that they didn't get. And then they'll filter back in. So, in terms of our day-to-day working, it doesn't really change. We keep going, it's the same thing. We've got matches to play even when the guys are away. So we've got to prepare like we normally do and have our weeks the way we normally do. So it's kind of just keep going, really, to be honest.
Yeah, yeah. And then when someone like that retires as well, then sort of moves on, like what's how does that feel around the club? Like he's been involved for how many years did you say?
Yeah, 13, 14 years probably, I'd say. Yeah, it's definitely you notice it like with that. So I mean, normally it's different because normally it's the end of season and you'd have kind of maybe anywhere between 4 to 8 or 9 guys leaving the club at the end of a year, depending on guys moving on to different clubs or whatever or retiring. So it's unusual to have it at the start of a season. So it's a bit of a unique situation. So that usual thing of end of season always has a certain feel to it, but it's an end of a season. We'll wrap them up. Whereas today's a kind of a different one in that it's coming from a World Cup. And then it's, yeah, this happens. Now we got to go on with the rest of the training day. So it's a bit unusual that way. But look, he's so fondly known and Keith is around the place a lot anyway that, it's kind of like a bit of a goodbye, but he'll be around anyway.
Yeah. And then for you starting off in this world then, so where are you from originally?
So I grew up and lived in Dublin, trained there in UCD, University College Dublin. And then I moved to Galway, it's probably 16 years ago now, to do a medical scheme. Within that, then during that scheme, I went to the States and came back, and I decided I wanted to do general practice, but I had a year off between when the training scheme for general practice started and when I qualified or got accepted onto it. So I did a master's in sports and exercise medicine. So I'd always played a lot of sport growing up, rugby mainly, but everything really from soccer, athletics. So sport was always my kind of main interest. So then when I qualified in general practice and had my master's done, I started doing a bit of work with different teams. So locally in Galway, started working with a couple of kind of amateur soccer teams up to one of the kind of semi-professional soccer teams, and then got involved in rugby there. Initially with some of the underage teams and second team at Connacht. And then started 2 years kind of helping out with Connacht with their match day doctor, team doctor work. As I was in general practice there, I kind of did a bit of work for the lads when they needed GP stuff and got more and more involved that way. So then the head of medicine job came up at Munster at the same time that I was kind of at a bit of a crossroads of general practice. And I thought, you know what, this is something that I'd be interested in doing. Took the plunge, jumped in, and it's about an hour from where I live. So I thought, look, it's a reasonable commute. And it was such a steep learning curve. Wow, it was such a change to go from the relative safety and lack of pressure of general practice in the sense of, you've got a bit of time to make decisions, to going into a professional rugby environment where, no, I need to know, can this guy train today? And if he can train, what can he do? What are his restrictions? If he can't, when's he back? To the day kind of thing. And that was the biggest thing. I found that first probably 2 seasons, a really big steep learning curve in terms of just the pressure to know stuff, and then also just your own. I thought I had reasonably good musculoskeletal skills, but really was just sitting down with some of the physios here and learning. And then that was just a really big jump in terms of going, okay, what's my knowledge base here? Actually, God, I've got a lot to learn. So I found that a challenge, but really good as well. And it's been a great experience. So then over the last, God, I've been here 6 years now, there came an opportunity to go back and train as a sports and exercise consultant while doing the job. So I went back and did that, and just finished that up in July, actually. So I kind of split between the two now. So I do this job kind of half the week, and then sports and exercise consultant do the half the week. So it's kind of a nice portfolio of everything, of both the elite sport mix and then everything day to day in terms of activity medicine, so everyone from your weekend triathlete to your 6-year-old who used to play soccer with a sore knee to, your mother with sore hip, it's all there. So it's a big, change and broad spectrum of kind of things that we see.
Yeah, and then in terms of just starting off then, so what made you want to get into that field in the first place?
As I say, I'd always played sports, and I found that once I'd done the masters, when I was in general practice, I spent a lot of my time seeing a lot of the musculoskeletal conditions. And then obviously doing a bit of work with the sporting teams, that was kind of what kind of gave me the most interest. Sorry. Sorry, Andy.
It's all right. I had a tickle earlier on. It's hideous. So yeah. So
It's the if you see the weather outside, I got drowned at training earlier, so it probably doesn't help. So yeah, I think, look, it's my firstly growing up, everything for me was sports. Everything I watched, everything I read, everything I did was about sports. So once I went into medicine, it kind of seemed natural to kind of combine the two if I could. That's just the way it happened, that the more I did in GP, the more I saw of the kind of general musculoskeletal stuff that came in, and then getting involved in the teams. Just, I think with anyone who wants to get involved in sport, I think you got to put yourself in there, and then the more you say yes to things, the higher up you go, and not being afraid to start at kind of consider it a low level or like a amateur level and just getting involved, because to be honest, the injuries I saw at those games are the same injuries I'm seeing now, so the injuries don't change. It's just maybe the pressure to know what you want, have your accurate diagnosis and plan is challenged a bit higher the higher up you go in terms of having to have that quicker. But the injuries are still the injuries, whether you're walking down the street and you twist your ankle or you do it on the pitch in Thomond Park. It's a lot of the time it's the same injury. It's just the demands that you're asking the person to get back to, change. And so it's been great. It's been a challenge, as I say, at times, but it's been a fun learning curve as well. Like, so, I'm lucky in that I'm now found a job that I love getting up and going to, it's never the same, it's always something new. I can just, like, in terms of even stuff today. Like it's been something new. It's all the injuries are something, there's always a little variation on them as well. So there's always something extra to be learning as well, which is, if you've got that interest, it's great. It's good fun.
Yeah. What is a typical day for you then? I know you say it's different every day, but like what's happened today, for example?
Yeah, so like, look, we would, as I say, Monday here, so we would have our injury clinic this morning. So any of the guys who maybe picked up niggles or injuries at the weekend, seeing, look, what stuff needs maybe further treatment or investigation. Does something need a scan? Is that something we can do on site? Does anything need treatment today? So see that stuff in the weekend. Picked up a few guys who've come back from the World Cup, trying to have a look at some of the stuff. Maybe done a couple of injections today, and then trying to organise, some guys retiring. That's kind of trying to organize the exit medical from that point of view. Just a very wide variety. And then later on the day, we go out, have training. So some the days I'm here, I'll definitely go pitch side just to make sure there's nothing during training. And then the days I'm not here, it's kind of a mix between being here in the morning and then being in clinic, in sports and exercise medicine clinic, then in the afternoon or something like that. So kind of changes each day, but that's the kind of the broad outline of what we do.
Mm. And then in terms of like when you were wanting to get involved, then you're doing your training, like how big were the opportunities to get into sport? Like you said, you had to just say yes to a lot of different things, but how competitive was it and what were the opportunities like?
It's funny. I think you've got to go look for them. I have a really, it's a famous or the nice quote that I use all the time is the quiet priest doesn't get the parish. So it's a very Irish quote, but I think you kind of have to put yourself in the place and kind of look for those opportunities because they don't tend to just fall onto your lap. You kind of almost have to. So with Connacht, I would have kind of worked in the emergency department. I knew the team doctor at Connacht at the time, and I just kind of went to him and said, look, this is where I'm at. What kind of opportunities are available? Before that, I would have worked for the FAI, which is the Soccer Association in Ireland, and I would have met the head of the FAI at the time, Alan Byrne, and Alan gave me a great help in terms of getting me involved and just saying, look, one of our women's team needs a doctor at the minute. Can you do that? And I said, yeah, absolutely happy to do it. And like I say, the injuries there were the same injuries that I deal with now. We had ACLs, we had deltoid ankle ligament injuries. So the pathologies weren't different. It was just maybe the athletes you're dealing with weren't as high profile as they are now. So it's kind of finding them and then just kind of saying yes to it, and then just trying to find opportunities as they came. But competitiveness, not as much as I would have thought, but it's just the opportunities aren't going to just pop up. I think you almost have to go and find people who might be able to point you in the direction and say, yeah, look, I've got a under 18 game I need help with. Because to be honest, I think there's more opportunities than there are doctors willing to go and stand on the sideline, is the honest answer. I think there's definitely opportunities for people who've got the right, kind of skills and attitude. A lot of it's just being able to be humble and going out there and, a lot of it sometimes, particularly at different games, is are you happy to carry the bags? Are you happy to, chip in if you need to? You're not just there to see the injuries. It's not all glamour either.
Yeah. So in terms of like that, was there a particular sport that you liked more than others?
So I would have, as I say, I would have played rugby always growing up. But it was soccer and actually kind of Irish sports, so Gaelic and well, hurling actually I was involved with initially as well. Um, but so from a sports point of view or sports position, it was literally what was available. Whereas rugby has always been the thing that I would have played or been most interested in growing up. So it just happened that I kind of looked for opportunities in that area, and they do come up. And it's then how you kind of fit in with the group at that stage makes the difference. And can you provide a, you don't have to know. I think the biggest thing for me learning was I think I went in initially going, I have to know everything. And actually, the best skill I've learned is being able to go, do you know what, I don't know, but here's who I'm going to ask if I'm going to go abroad or I'm going to go to specialist whoever about a hip problem or a knee problem or even using the guys I have here who are so experienced. They've been doing this for longer than I have and go, look, what do you think is the injury here? What do you think the best approach is? So I think going in with an open mind to just know that you kind of are there to help and assist, but also know that you don't have to have the answer to everything is key as well. That's definitely been one of the biggest learning curves for me.
Mm. And how long did it take for you to like, come across that and have that philosophy?
Oh, I think definitely my first season in Munster, I felt this internal pressure to know the answer to everything. And I think just with time and a bit of maturity, I realized that, you know what, I don't actually have to know everything here. It's okay to say, I don't know what's going on here, or I'm actually not sure the best treatment for this, or here's where we're going to go about. I think it's okay to do that. And that was a really good learning curve for me, just as a doctor in general, is going, you don't have to have the answer for everything. And if I don't, who do I go to, or what way is the best way to go about it? I think that was a massive learning for me. Yeah. But it took time, because I went in definitely at that thing of going, sure, I'm meant to know this, haven't I? That was hard. Like, that was really tough. But it was great. Like I say, I can say that now. I think during that first season, I spent a lot of time at home going, Jesus, am I cut out for this? Have I bitten off more than I can chew? What am I doing here? And you get the whole imposter syndrome thing, and you think, Jesus, am I the person that I'm meant to be doing this job? Is there someone better who could be doing this? Am I going to get told to not come back next week? So you get all those things. Yeah, yeah, all the time.
Is that something that you still have?
Always. Yeah. I think you always realize, look, there's always stuff you don't know. Have a healthy level of, humility about stuff, because first of all, there's so much in medicine, is just so medicine and sports and injury, whatever. It's there's nothing 100% clear cut any of the time. So you always just have to kind of understand that. And you know, I think then the other side of it is, you always have to realize that, your job is here to try and support the guys to their best of their ability. And, um, so nuanced in terms of where guys are coming from, in terms of their own needs and demands, and where they want to get to, and where they want to be at, and everything, and their own understanding of stuff. So no, yeah, there's always that thing in the back of your head of going, God, is there someone better at this than me? Or, do I really know what I'm talking about? So yeah, it's great, really, that self-doubt. I think it's what is the Dunning-Kruger curve, isn't that the one? Yeah. The more you
Yeah,
know, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know. It's great fun. Yeah.
I think no, it is interesting, isn't it? Yeah, it's like I think everyone, if they're really honest, must have that, like, well, whether it's a daily basis, but certainly very regularly.
Yeah, and I think if you don't have that, then you're almost less aware of what you don't know, and that's actually probably worse. So, look, I've grown comfortable with it. I don't love it, but I think it's important to be aware of that and have that self-awareness as well, because otherwise you're just not learning then.
Yeah, they might get to teach me how to become comfortable with it. Then that's
No, I don't like, yeah, I think you just have to realize that it's okay. That's why it's okay to not be okay all the time. Yeah.
yeah. I think that's
Um,
something which I've picked up from having these chats, that people at high levels like you and the other people, really interesting high level people, is it's quite a consistent theme, that there's a lot of humble, um, and just realizing that you may go in a little bit brash, maybe arrogant to some extent at certain times. Not all the time, but that's what some of the things have been. And then it's like, actually, no, I don't need to be the big person. It is good to ask opinions. It is good to get feedback from people that
yeah,
you know.
I like that. Like, I think it's always nice if you've got a good kind of thought process around it. Like, it's always good to keep learning stuff, because there's no way, if you even just look at the breadth of medicine, that I'm going to know everything about everything. So it's nice to keep learning stuff, and kind of things are changing, newer approaches, whatever. Like, so it's you kind of, if you have that interest, I think that's the key. And look, ultimately it comes back down to people, and being able to, your job here, my job here, is to provide the lads with good care, and then provide a good communication with coaching staff, and do that to the best of my ability. Work alongside, it's okay to rely on the guys around me, because they're so talented. The physiotherapists, the nutrition, the sports science guys I work with, they're all top level. Like, so it's okay to rely on that as well. Don't need to be the genius that figures it all out.
And then so with that then, so for you developing and understanding that you have got that support network around you, like do you get any support outside of the immediate team that you're working with, or like how do you get like work with mentorship or anything like that?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So, like, I've never had a formal person I would consider a mentor that I would have gone to through this. I wish I'd had one, and it's why I've always kind of, like, if younger doctors have come now and said, "Look, I'm interested in getting involved," I'm like, absolutely, come sit in a clinic, come down to games, whatever, because I kind of want to give that back, because I didn't have it as much. But I definitely had a couple of people who I would have gone to, and still, like, like someone I go to a lot, like, would be Kieran Cosgrave. Kieran's the Irish team doctor. I know you've had Kieran on before. I go to Kieran a lot about stuff, and go, look, I've this going on, what do you think? Now, we'd have conversations because we'd have some shared players anyway, but even before that, or going into sports and exercise medicine, Kieran would have been a great, kind of contact and confidant to go, John, Kieran, I'm actually not sure I know what's going on here. And you go, yeah, that's okay. This is say, I would have done that with Kieran, would have done with Alan Byrne at the FAI. Alan was a really good mentor, particularly when I was starting off. And then John O'Donnell was the head of medicine at Connacht when I started, and John was the first person who got me involved or whatever. So I think it is good to just find people and then also go to them and go, look, I'm actually not sure here. What do you think? Because that's the way you learn from other people's experiences. Because a lot of the time, yes, you can read it in a textbook and yes, you can read all the articles, but until you actually see it in real life and go, actually, how would you manage this, or what do you think, or you experience it, you go, okay, now I understand it. That lived experience is just huge. And sometimes you can't, you have to rely on other people to give you their experience of it as well, because you can't experience all the things. So that's been huge for me. Yeah, I think it's key is that you find people that you can chat to and talk through these things, because that's the key for me, definitely. Yeah, it's what helped me massively, especially during those early years when you're kind of doubting yourself and you're thinking, Jesus, am I actually cut out for this? Am I out of my depth? Do I really know what I'm talking about? Um, you find those guys are kind of great to bounce it off, maybe people who are a couple of steps ahead of you or have done it for a bit longer than you, or whatever, that you can just kind of go, no, look, and a lot of them will say, look, we've been through the same thing as well. So that's definitely, I think that's that looking for that what's the word I want, support or whatever, or kind of shared understanding is great. Yeah, absolutely.
Mm. And then in terms of like the different sports you've been involved in, what are the different dynamics involved in them?
So it's interesting. Like, I mean, the main two I would have probably done in terms of team environments is soccer and rugby. I think within the soccer environment, it was as a doc, you probably aren't as hands-on because there's less big injuries. When there are injuries, you kind of get involved, but there's probably less volume, so you're not quite as hands-on. Whereas definitely in the rugby environment, it's day to day. It's there's a lot of involvement. The injuries are different. The level of injuries is different, so you probably have a greater involvement in that sense. But at the minute, yeah, so from that point of view, they'd be very different that way. Whereas the soccer environment would be definitely, you would have less probably pressure on you in that sense.
Mm. Yeah, and in terms of like just in Ireland in general, then, so in terms of the popularity, focus, attention, how does it differ from rugby to soccer over there?
I think in Ireland still soccer's number one, yeah, and then you probably have Gaelic football and hurling would be two and three. So rugby's probably fourth sport. It'll have increased in popularity after the World Cup, but it's still definitely those three would be much greater in terms of participation numbers and everything. Yeah.
Mm. Then in terms of like your own pathway, then, so you've worked through a lot and you identified that you wanted to work in sport quite early on. Did you have any like pathway that you planned that you wanted to end up at a certain spot?
Probably not. It probably just happened. Now, some of it was choices I made. To say doing that master's in sports and exercise medicine would have put me in that way, going towards sports. And then, from a general practice point of view, taking the decision to leave was probably the hardest. Because it was it would have been easier to have just stayed in that position and continue on. Whereas taking that leap out was kind of a bit more of an unknown. And then, as I say, the sports and exercise medicine side of things is relatively new in Ireland. That training pathway, so that was new. Um, so some of it was kind of just taking a bit of a leap, and kind of hoping that things would improve, or things would change in terms of what I was doing from a day-to-day work point of view.
Mm. Yeah, no, that also seems like to be quite a pathway, as in there's no pathway. You just kind of like you're saying yes to things and
Yeah,
circumstance and things seem to
I like
happen.
that. Like I would have gone over to one of the things I looked at, kind of, it was identifying things. I was like, right, I actually would like to get more involved in, say, things like musculoskeletal ultrasound, or I was doing a lot of injections in general practice that would have been traditionally landmark based. And I thought, okay, this could be better. So going over and actually spending 2 years going over to the UK doing a postgraduate course in musculoskeletal ultrasound to learn that was great for my own learning in terms of my own musculoskeletal learning. It was really beneficial. But there was no one to tell me to do that. That was just kind of right. I've seen something I want to learn more of. How do I do it? Right. I'm gonna have to book flights and head over and back to you know, Bournemouth, which isn't the closest place to Galway. So it took a bit of commitment to do that, but sometimes you just have to do that if it's what you're interested in, you know.
Yeah, well, Bournemouth is a great place, isn't it? The ACC is a really good
Yeah.
venue, you know, got very good reputation. So in terms of the other people that were doing the course with you there, like, does the alumni keep in touch on things?
Yes, it's interesting. So one of the guys I would have met during it, I talk kind of semi-regularly to Patrick O'Halloran. It's Patrick's based. He's just finishing his sports and exercise medicine training, and he'd work out of Birmingham as well. So talk to him a little bit. A lot of them then would have been kind of a mixture of podiatry, sonography, and then a few kind of sports and exercise medicine regs and stuff like that. So yeah, it was good. It was a good course. It was very well established at the time I was looking at doing it. There's a few more good courses since then have come up. I know Smug run a course and Brunel run another good course as well. So it's definitely getting more popular. And you can see as you know as the equipment becomes a little bit more available and a little bit more accessible, you can see how beneficial it is. Like so, it's definitely one of the things I really enjoyed doing. I didn't enjoy the commute because, you know, flying over from Dublin to Heathrow and then renting a car, driving down to Bournemouth and turning around and coming back again that day was a challenge, but it was worth it in the end. I think the hardest thing over in Ireland is trying to get mentorship in that. Like, so I had to go up to Antrim actually to do a bit with a colleague of mine who's musculoskeletal radiologist. He helped me out a bit in terms of getting my scanning numbers up, but there's definitely, again, it comes down to the same thing I said earlier. Kind of, if you have an idea of what you want to get, you almost have to go and get it a little bit, and kind of because it won't sometimes get handed to you, or it's not always a clear pathway. And it's not necessarily that people put up blocks, but you kind of almost have to look for a path, if that makes sense. It's not
Yeah.
always clear. It's not always clearly obvious there. So you know, but it was great. It was really enjoyable. I've loved doing it. Like, it's definitely made a good addition to my practice, you know.
I think that it's not just in Ireland, that's in the UK. Like we can really see it's exploding MSK ultrasound over here. But again, mentorship is really challenging.
Yeah.
And I think you're right, really. I think it's like with anything, you have got to, there's always opportunity. There's always things that you can make happen. But it's competitive, but there's always different things that you can push forward. And like, how do you see it in terms of Ireland then from the ultrasounds? Like what do you see the future being?
There's a huge market for it because it's still very early doors, especially from the musculoskeletal point of view. There's not a whole lot of people doing it. And it's the market here because it's different to the NHS where they'll have MSK clinics, they'll have MSK ultrasound clinics. They just don't have them here because the access to MRI is actually quite good now, and it's increased an awful lot, even for people who don't have private health insurance. It's increased. So most of the radiologists will think, well, do you know what? It's much easier for me to just, you know, get the person to do an ultrasound or an MRI of their shoulder because I can sit down, read that. Whereas to do the ultrasound is going to give me a little bit of work to do, and I got to, you know, it's easier for them to do it that way. Whereas I see the benefit of it because I use it day to day. But there's definitely market for it. It's about now trying to just get people to understand what it's good for, what its limitations are, where it's beneficial, and then the teaching is the next bit, you know.
Mm,
But in
yeah.
terms of access, I mean, there's people walking around medical schools now with handheld probes all over the place, you know. The stethoscope is getting dumped because people are doing bedside echoes, you know. So it is interesting. It's just, I think having the knowledge is the key bit, you know.
Mm, yeah. No, well, no, definitely. There's CPD up flying around everywhere at the moment. Like you
Yeah.
say, smug are really good, but there's real growth in that area. And like in terms of sort of semi going back to the mentorship thing, in terms of your own personal and professional development, do you do any work on things outside of the medical sphere? So like reading books, whether it's podcasts or anything like that?
So I commute a lot. So I live in Galway, which is the west coast of Ireland. I work in Limerick and I work in Dublin. So either an hour or 2 hours away from each other. So I spend a lot of time in the car, and that's my time to kind of podcast between stuff that's completely inane and a distraction, and stuff that's kind of maybe a little bit of learning and so certain kind of growth. It depends on the day. So yeah, I try and do that. I try and actually find things that might give me a bit of interest. probably less so in the medical sphere and just go more towards kind of, it's a mix. Honestly, sometimes it could be something as simple as Adam Kay, listening to his books, which I'm listening to at the minute, listen to one of his books at the minute, which have been really interesting as someone who
What's
kind of,
that one?
so Adam Kay was a guy, pretty famous. This is going to hurt. He was a doctor, left medicine, went into comedy basically and screenwriting. But it's just interesting. Some of the stuff he talks about is it would definitely hit home in terms of, as a doctor, how you're just kind of almost expected to just go in and suck it up and keep going and not really look for help. So I found that really resonated in terms of even just forget about sports, forget about high level elite medicine, just generally life in general. And medicine particularly is that one of those specialties where you're kind of just seen to just, yeah, go in, deal with this. You've these horrific traumas, now go home and forget that you saw that today, you know.
Mm.
And even in our, you know, there's guys who I've seen who've had to retire from injuries and had to walk away from sport, and like you go home and you kind of you can't not take that with you as well. Like, so it's trying to have a good healthy ability to maybe debrief from it, and then, you know, outside of that, you know, we have a busy life. We have 4 young kids as well, so it's that keeps you very grounded and busy. So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's don't know if you know George Bounds, but he's sports doc out in London. He was just giving me he gave me a podcast to listen to today. So it's overwhelming, isn't it, in terms of all the different things that you
Yeah.
can do. Like, I love personal and professional development, but it's just like it's endless, whether it's
Yeah.
masterclass, whether it is podcasts, whether it's,
Yeah.
whatever else. I mean, that's one of
I
the reasons why I like this, really.
Yeah, and that's why sometimes I specifically don't do the education podcast in the car, because it's like, do you know what, this is a bit of time to, you know, revive. So I remember talking to a psychologist before, and they talked about the kind of the 3 states you can be in is either drive, survive, or revive. And we don't spend, particularly those people who are trying to be at the top of something or whatever. And I'm not by any means saying I'm at the top of anything, but that thing of driving to be really, really successful all the time, I go, well, how much time are you actually spending reviving? Because you can't, like, and like even I remember saying, you know, I was talking about, oh well, look, I'd go for a run or exercise. He goes, okay, well, how much does actually revive, or how much are you actually looking at the clock while you're running, going, I could be doing this faster, or I could be pushing heavier in the gym. She's like, how much does actually reviving? I was like, Jesus, okay, I need to take stock here and realize that I need a little bit more of the actually just take care of yourself and just debrief a little bit, you know,
Mm.
because otherwise it's very easy just get caught into the whole 5 a.m. breakfast club. We need to get up and be perfect, and you know,
It
the what is
does.
it?
It changes a lot, doesn't it, with that? Because you see like the 5 a.m. club, and then it's like, well, actually, no, now you need to be sleeping, you need to be switching your phone off, all these things. And I'm sure there is a combination, but it's quite overwhelming, all the different inputs.
I think it's just have the balance, because if you try and drive it all the time, something's going to give way. Do you know what I mean? And it will. And I've experienced that. Like I've been in a very stressed environment, and you know, we talked about this earlier, and you asked me, like, obviously one of the things that would have happened in my career is, I'll give an example, is Saracens, Jamie George. There was that whole incident, and like when I reflect on that, and I don't mind talking about it. Like, it's one of those ones where I was hugely under pressure. I was in a job that I was questioning whether I was definitely the right person for it. There was a lot of stress in the environment, and these things happen, spill over, and you realize, actually, hang on a second. You need to actually step back from this and realize, what are you there for? What's your role, first of all? And are you actually minding yourself that these things don't happen, you know? And I think that's a key bit in it that I've learned over time, is that, you know, I could get up at 5 o'clock and be in the gym every day if I want, and I've done it. But then I'll go home, and am I able to give anything at home to the family I have, or I'm actually good at doing my job when the lads come in here? And the bit I enjoy most, we've had a couple of players who've really struggled, mental health wise, and I can think of one player in particular, and that was the most satisfying thing I've done in 6 years, is help him through that. He was ready to quit the game. And he's gone on now and played international rugby, you know, 2 years later. And he was going through a really difficult point where he was ready to leave and walk out the door. So that's my point, in terms of just being able to maybe find that revive bit, not actually just always be driving to, you know, be the best, be the whatever, all that side of things, because it's going to burn, and you're going to burn it out in the end yourself.
Yeah, well, definitely. I mean, we were chatting about it over lunch today, talking about professional sports people and how a lot of it is just like, oh, they're getting paid a lot, so they should deal with it. And it's just like, well, that just doesn't make any sense whatsoever, because their reality is their reality. So with that particular player, then, so how often do you see? Are you become more aware of seeing that sort of thing now? Are they more aware? How does it work now from that psychological side?
I think we're definitely, like, in the 6 years I've been here, I've always been conscious of it because I came from a general practice background. So we would have seen a lot of it in general practice, a lot of mental health. But here it's something I kind of try to look out for. And I almost spend more of my time almost hunting for the guys who maybe aren't getting picked or are struggling with injury, and just trying to just check in and see. And I think as a club and as a union, particularly RFU, we have good supports in place from a psychology support, both clinical and performance. So sometimes people kind of get mixed up and think that, performance psychology is all about, being the best. How do you visualize, I'm going to perform at the highest level. And yes, that's important, but actually, ultimately, it comes back down to, well, how is the person thinking in terms of just their day to day? First of all, get that right, and the other stuff will come right as well. So from a mental health, I think we're better. I don't think we'll ever be perfect because, ultimately all you can do is keep reinforcing to people that it's okay, that they can come and talk about stuff, that, it's okay to not be okay at the time, that it's okay to be vulnerable, to go and look for help. And lads are much, much better at that now. And it comes from senior guys standing up and saying, look, I've had this issue. This is how we dealt with it. There's less stigma around it now. So I think that massively makes a difference. And then having that support, just providing that support, then hopefully gives guys a safety net that they know how to help, how to get help and be supported through these things, because it comes to us all at some stage.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. And like you mentioned right at the start that you feel really lucky and privileged that you've got a job that you're excited about. What are the characteristics of this role that you're in now, or having that feeling? What are the things that you need to feel like that?
Um, what would I say? I suppose, look, it's something I enjoy doing, something that is challenging. There's obviously, like, people will kind of look and say, well, look, you're traveling around the world doing all these things. And, like, sometimes that's great and sometimes that's not great, because you're away from family, you're sitting in a hotel room and your kids are sick at home or they're missing you. So I think the balance is that I'm in a job that I find interesting. I'm in a job that, you know, is rewarding. I don't need to worry in terms of financially at the minute. Things are okay. So that takes a challenge off things. Um, but I think it's knowing that you're going to professionally enjoy it, that you're valued, I think, as a team member here, that helps as well. There'd be nothing worse than going into an environment where you feel like, people don't want you there or whatever. So I think that helps as well. They're probably the big ones, really. It's just
Yeah.
it's that thing of being valued, but actually enjoying it and being challenged.
Yeah, no, definitely, definitely. I think yeah, it's good to have that combination of both things, being comfortable but not too comfortable.
No, it's definitely not comfortable anyway. I can tell you that much anyway.
I can see it by the number of people that keep coming and trying to get your attention.
I know,
So
yeah. I've had a few door hanger on there, yeah. But
yeah.
that's all
And
right.
then so in terms of like then for people wanting to get into it, you've given loads of great advice already, but for people wanting to get involved, whether it's as a doctor, physio, anything into that the world that you're in, what would your advice be?
I think obviously, look, you got to do the basic stuff first and qualify through your specialty. Um, don't forget that, like, just because I'm mostly involved in musculoskeletal medicine, it's still everything else we see. We see everything from dermatological, we see illnesses, psychiatry, like all those fields are important. So don't just get hung up on one side of your practice being the only side. Um, have a good personality, I know that sounds like a really easy thing to do, but, like, one of the things I'll always talk about is, like, I spent from probably 14 working in different shops, restaurants, bars. You got to be able to talk to people. It's such an under appreciated skill of just being able to actually just have a conversation and then also listen to people and let them tell their story to you, because that's ultimately what you're there to help them with. And then in terms of getting involved in that sporting environment is look to see what you're interested in. Take the opportunities when they come up, because, like one of my favorite books, actually, I liked reading, and I get slagged for this, is Matthew McConaughey's Green Lights.
Oh,
So
I'm midway through this at the moment.
love it, absolutely love it, because I do agree with it. I think there is just that thing in life where suddenly opportunities present themselves, and you just got to go with it, because if you don't, then you'll go nowhere. Like I could easily have stayed in general practice, not taken the job at Munster, and I think my life would have gone a very different way, career would have gone a different way. Whereas I kind of went to that, then took the opportunity to go back and train in sports and exercise medicine, which was really hard because I was commuting 5 hours a day, every day for 2 years, with a pregnant wife and then a baby and 3 other children. And like, it was horrendous at times for them, let alone me. But it was the opportunity that presented itself, and it seemed like the right thing to go for. And I think that's what you have to do. You just have to not be afraid to go down those routes when they present themselves. And like I say, starting out in the rugby it's literally picking up a game. There was an A game in, I think, London Irish. It was my first game going over, and no one wanted to do it, so I said I'd go over. And like that's how that started. But it started because I'd already been at a conference where I met Alan, and he said, actually, would you mind doing the women's team? And these opportunities that came along, and just being able to go, yeah, I will. Now, obviously, you have to be cognizant of everyone else, but they're the things you got to be able to do. So I think it's that thing of knowing when to just go for things when they present themselves.
Yeah. No, it's good. Yeah, very good advice. I'm only halfway through, so once I've done, I'll come back to you and give you the view.
Do. It's much better as an audiobook than a reading it anyway.
So I'm on the audiobook, so
Yeah.
my fiance and I are listening to it at the moment, actually. But his story about when he goes to Australia, I just love that.
Brilliant. Yeah. The whole thing is just, and it gets better as he goes. You kind of go, Joe, and he's an interesting character, like so. But I like that outlook on things. I kind of agree. I think there's definitely that life flow of things where you just don't know where it's going. Don't presume it's going any which way, because it just changes. I would never have assumed I was living in Galway, working in Limerick. I was very Dublin centric growing up. I thought I was going to be living there for the rest of my life. So it's been 17 years since I've been there. So I think understanding that is important.
Brilliant. No, look, I've really enjoyed that as well. So
Cool.
thank you very much for sharing your
No,
time
no
and your
worries.
stories.
No worries at all.
And I'm looking forward to coming over and checking out the facility as well.
Definitely. Brilliant, Andy.
Brilliant.
Anytime.
All right, Jamie. Appreciate your time.
No
Thank you.
problem at all. No worries.
Cheers. Bye-bye.